more emergency service.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines this hour. Yemen's Presidential Council cancels UAE defense deal, paving the way for UAE forces in Yemen to leave within 24 hours. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, US President Donald Trump among world leaders to express concern over the attack on Russian President Vladimir Putin's residence. Ukraine's foreign minister called on other countries to refrain from responding to what he said were false Russian reports about an attack on President Vladimir Putin's residence, saying that it undermined the peace process. Taiwan's defense ministry says PLA rockets fell into areas that were closest to main Taiwan Island compared to the previous drills. Meta Platforms Meta AO is buying AI startup Manus to deepen into its push into agentic AI, aiming to embed the technology across its platforms as competition for next generation AI intensifies. US President Donald Trump says the United States could support another major strike on Iran if it rebuilds missile or nuclear programs, and warns Hamas of severe consequences if it does not disarm. A senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader warns that any aggression against the country will face an immediate harsh response after Donald Trump threatens to eradicate any nuclear rebuilding. He says Iran's missile and defense capabilities are not containable and will be used if revoked or provoked. US President Donald Trump says he is not concerned about China's military drills around Taiwan, calling them long-standing naval exercises. The comments come as Beijing stages blockade-style maneuvers near the island following a large US arms sale to Taiwan. All right, viewers, let's start with the top focus. Now, Russia has dismissed calls for evidence regarding an alleged Ukrainian drone attack on President Vladimir Putin's residence. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov defended Russia's position, stating that the attack was thwarted by air defense systems and that the military typically manages such inquiries. Despite no evidence being presented, Russia insists the attack took place. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiga refuted the claims, asserting that the incident never occurred. Ukraine expressed concern over reactions from the UAE, India and Pakistan, noting their failure to comment on a real Russian missile strike against a Ukrainian government building earlier this year. Ukraine urges nations to avoid responding to unverified claims, warning it only fuels Russian propaganda and undermines ongoing peace efforts. Despite this, the Kremlin says it will take a tougher stance in future Ukraine peace talks. All right, now joining me in this discussion is Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russian affairs expert and joins us from Brussels. Thank you very much, Dr. Doctorow, for joining me in this discussion. Of course, Ukraine denying that alleged attack on Putin's residence, and also statements have come in expressing concern over the alleged attack. But if it is not Ukraine, who could it possibly be?
Well, you've answered the question. That was exactly what I was about to say. It's strange logic. The Ukrainians, throughout the war, have been making similarly outrageous comments without anybody taking particular notice. Every time there was an attack, drone attack on one of the nuclear reactors, or the reactors under Russian control and or inside Russia, like the Kursk facility, the Ukraine said that the Russians did it, which means in every case the Russians were supposedly attacking themselves. This is not discussable. It is such cheap propaganda. It isn't worth talking about. However, of course, the Russians are not required to provide proofs. It stands by itself, and that such an attack would have been made only by one country, and that is Ukraine. However, let me add a certain complexity to this. On Russian talk shows, they were saying that, to their knowledge, this attack was facilitated by the British, that they provided the necessary targeting and so forth. So there is an international dimension outside of Ukraine.
So then how does it further affect the relation that Russia has with the European Union? Already, of course, it's continued to back Ukraine, as everybody would know by now, all our viewers at least. Do you think Russia is going to have a more aggressive stance, especially because Putin has been maintaining earlier as well that Europe seems to be in a mood to start a war?
Well, Europe is divided and becoming more divided by the day. One of my friends pointed out to me an article that 2 days ago appeared in Die Welt, which is the most widely read German press week daily. And Die Welt had an article saying that it's time to admit the sad truth, the bitter truth, that Ukraine has lost the war, and to adjust our policy towards Russia accordingly. So there is, in this most widely read German newspaper, and effectively a denunciation of the chancellor. And this is not coming from the left. My goodness, no. Die Linke is one of the leftist body in the German political spectrum, has been a supporter of Merz and made his election as chancellor possible. No, it's not coming from the left. It's coming from the center right. Die Welt is a publication of the center right in Germany, of the Christian Democrat side of the political spectrum, not of the far right. And they are saying that the war is lost. So Europe is divided. The logic of what I just described is that Mr. Merz will fall. And the logic of that is that Ursula von der Leyen will fall. And of course, let's not be too logical here, because a lot of illogical things have happened in the last 3 years. Nonetheless, you asked the question, what will the Russians do?
Yeah.
One thing they will not do now is attack Mr. Zelensky. They have made it plain that they consider this drone attack to be state-sponsored terrorism, and the Russians are not going to respond with their own state-sponsored terrorism.
Right.
But yes, they are changing their negotiating terms.
All right, a very crucial statement that you mentioned was a suspected role of UK in this. UK is right now, dealing with an economy that's not very well, and anyway there has been opposition coming up within the United Kingdom of it supporting the Ukraine war with all the finances that it has been sending out, when its own people are, don't have disposable income in their pockets. Do you think it will be able to continue this aggression when its own economy is in doldrums?
Well, that depends on what happens elsewhere in the region. If Mr. Merz comes under attack, or if he changes his policy under this clear political pressure he's receiving, even from the very friendly group of Die Welt, then Mr. Starmer will be standing on very fragile ground, and probably he will lose his footing and be taken down by others in the Labour Party, who have been circling him and in the last months and are rumored to want to replace him. So Mr. Starmer is certainly going to be in a weak position. Whether he falls or not is unforeseeable, but it is possible.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. for giving your opinion, but do continue to stay on with us. There's some more information now coming in. The Polish government has also confirmed that the European leaders are set to discuss the ongoing war in Ukraine on Tuesday. The high-level talks come amid intensified diplomatic efforts to push for a just and lasting peace, bolster security guarantees, and coordinate financial and military support for Kyiv as the conflict enters its fourth year. The meeting follows latest talks between the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and US President Donald Trump, where both leaders discussed the proposed peace framework and the security guarantees for Ukraine. All right, let's request Dr. Doctor to join me back in the discussion here. Dr. Doctor, what do you think is going to be some of the key talking points following this attack on Putin's house?
Well, I think that the people who are assembling now, today, the ones you mentioned, they are the hardliners. There are no fault lines among them, such as I just described, seem to exist in Germany against Merz and his pro-war position. So they will all be coming to the support of Mr. Zelensky and probably denouncing these Russian claims as being disinformation. I do not see them lining up to criticize Zelensky for responsibility in this, or to point a finger at the Brits as having enabled it. No, they will come down and reaffirm their support for Zelensky. After all, they are the ones who have promoted the commitment by the EU to a 95 billion euro loan that is backed by the EU budget. And they are so politically invested in that position that they cannot back down without virtually resigning their offices.
And another point that I want to take up with you, Kyiv is saying there is no proof of the attack on Putin's house and whether he was even there when the strikes took place. What kind of evidence is it really looking for now when there are all these satellite images that have come out?
Right. I think this is begging our credulity to think that the Russians are obliged to provide photographs of pieces of the downed drones. They probably will in time, but they would not wait for this evidence to be produced before drawing political conclusions and stating those conclusions, to explain what they're about to do imminently. A massive attack on Kyiv is almost a certainty. That they would attack government offices is not yet clear, and I'd say is improbable, as given, as I've said, their denunciation of what they say the Ukrainians have done, calling it state terror. So they're not going to respond in kind. But massive, damaging destruction of infrastructure in Kyiv is almost a certainty.
All right. Well, then thank you very much, Dr. Doctor, for joining me in this discussion and weighing in your opinion. And with that, viewers, we're going to proceed. Now, Rashid Al-Alimi, the Saudi-backed head of Yemen's Presidential Leadership Council, has ordered all UAE forces to leave Yemen within 24 hours. This comes hours after an airstrike on Yemen's southern port of Mukalla by Saudi-led coalition. Ultimatum signals a major fracture in the coalition that has fought Houthi rebels since 2015. As per local media reports, Rashid Al-Alimi also cancelled a defense pact with UAE and accused the UAE in a televised speech of fueling internal strife in Yemen. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia also urged the Emiratis to comply with the demand. However, the UAE's foreign ministry has not responded yet. And to discuss this further, I would like to request Dr. Rajan Kochar to join me. He's an international relations and defense expert from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. Kochar, for joining me here at NewsX World. Do you see, the forces actually leaving as has been asked?
Thank you, Kriti. See, in order to understand Yemen, we have to first try to understand that what is the methodology by which Yemen is being governed today. You see, it is not governed by a single coherent authority. It's a fragmented polity where control is exercised through competing governments like this present case of UAE and Saudi Arabia, militias and external patrons, like the United States also has a key role here. So, and of course Iran. So these are the fragmented structures. So when you have this kind of a situation in a country, you are bound to have various fissures with regards to the governance, and we are actually seeing this presidential leadership council, which was created in April 2022, and it was basically on the principle of a collective presidency representing anti-Houthi factors. See, Houthis are prominently strong in the northern part of Yemen, and they control almost 70% of the Red Sea. These factions which are ruling actually Yemen are in the southern and the eastern part of Yemen. So a problem actually comes that when you have conflicting interests, two different countries are working on integrated strategic assessment. It means that these factions which start actually working against each other are weakening against the proxy competition, because we are aware this proxy war in involvement of Iran is also there, and it actually creates a fissure like your situation. And what you asked me was that will this happen? A strong possibility is that unless Saudi Arabia seeks a negotiated exit from Yemen, prioritizing the border security and de-escalation with the Houthis, because the problem is the grassroots of the problem is the Houthis, because these are basically the anti-Houthi factions, and whenever they get dominated by the Houthis, you will find fractures taking place within the coalition, and they tend to blame each other. So I think possibilities, unless they sit down and iron out their differences, unfortunately, I think that this faction will break down.
All right, let's talk about the statement that's also coming from Saudi Arabia. It is saying that national security is a red line as UAE forces have been asked to leave Yemen. How do you assess that?
See, it is it's not a very simple assessment. Like, it's not an assessment which you can just make off the cuff. What you have to understand is the sensitivity of both the countries. UAE is wanting to prioritize control over the strategic ports, the maritime choke points like the Aden, Mukalla, and Socotra. So, and these are basically counter-Islamic objectives, and that's why fragmentation in Yemen is taking place. Saudi Arabia feels that its authority is being questioned because it's the dominant part of the force here. Its authority is being questioned by the UAE because UAE is looking for its own national interest. Saudi Arabia is looking for its own national interest.
Yeah.
There is no common interest which is actually emerging here in Yemen, because if you align with each other and you form a common sort of a group, and you have a single point objective that you have to challenge the Houthis, but within yourself, if your interests are not aligned and they are conflicting, then I think there'll be a problem.
All right, we'll watch out how those developments proceed. But thank you for your opinion, Dr. Kochar, and I request you to stay on as well. Moving ahead, viewers, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has said that the Southeast Asian bloc will carefully assess political developments in Myanmar following the first phase of the country's long delayed elections held over the weekend. He's also stressed that ASEAN's approach would prioritize reducing violence, avoiding steps that could worsen divisions, while also keeping open the possibility of an inclusive and credible political process. The elections have been strongly criticized by the United Nations, Western governments, and international rights groups, who argue the process is neither free nor fair and is designed to entrench military rule through proxy political parties. Meanwhile, Myanmar's ruling junta has rejected those accusations, insisting that the vote is not being carried out through force or coercion, and further claiming that it enjoys public support. Myanmar remains gripped by a brutal civil war and a deepening humanitarian crisis as polling continues in multiple phases. Myanmar has remained in turmoil since the military overthrew an elected civilian government in a 2021 coup, sparking an armed uprising that has since seen resistance forces seize large parts of the country. And I request Dr. Kocher to join me back in the discussion here. Dr. Kocher, neither the UN has intervened in Myanmar since 2021 coup in terms of, having a physical presence, nor has ASEAN sent its observers when the polls were being held. But now they are saying that they are going to monitor the developments after the elections. How fair is that, statement?
You see, whenever you enter into negotiations or you enter into interfering into a country's development or its internal affairs, you have to follow a policy of womb to tomb. It means right from the inception,
Yeah,
you have to be committed.
right.
And only then you can progress the developments as they way in a manner they take place. Now, what is happening in Myanmar is there is a civil war since the last more than a decade taking place. ASEAN started on a 5-point consensus, a peace plan as they actually call it, and they wanted, and it had the endorsement of all the ASEAN countries, and Myanmar was also in agreement at that point of time. And to briefly actually tell you, these 5 points were the immediate cessation of violence, constructive dialogue, special envoys, humanitarian assistance, and visits of special envoys on a regular basis. So unfortunately,
yeah.
this military junta has not enforced this, as a result of which today the ASEAN countries are divided and fractured on their opinion of this election. As you can see, the hardline states are Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore.
Yeah.
Because they are rejecting these elections as legitimate exercise. Their viewpoint is that this military junta is trying to regularize or legitimize its being there through a sham elections. And that is why the United Nations is also calling it similarly. The pragmatics here among the ASEAN countries are, Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. These are the countries who have a slightly more balanced approach towards Myanmar, and they want to see that how the elections take place, and then they would like to comment on these elections. So, and please don't forget one important factor, that is China. Because if you look at Myanmar, on the eastern side and on the southeastern side, China has important economic interest in Myanmar. There is a pipeline which goes from central Myanmar up to the Chinese province. There is a sizable mining activity of the rare earth materials in Myanmar towards the Chinese border. So China has got strong economic interest here, and China is playing the rebels. It is playing up the rebels against the military junta. So as you see, we have the Arakan army on one side, we have the Chin National Army on the other side, and similarly we have this rebel army onto the Chinese border. So this entire Myanmar seems to be engulfed. As a matter of fact, most of their borders are today controlled by rebels. It is only the southern part of Myanmar which is under the control of the military junta, and the military junta over a period of time has lost its relevance because it has got fragmented between China and the Western powers, because it is perceived to be more pro-China rather than the pro-West. And that is why we are hearing such statements from the West, because West perceives a military junta to be closer to China and serving the Chinese interest more than the Western interest.
All right, sure. Well, for now, thank you very much, Dr. Kochar, for your opinion. And viewers, we proceed now. In fact, there's some breaking news coming in. Iran has designated the Royal Canadian Navy as a terrorist organization, escalating tensions between Tehran and Ottawa. The Iranian Foreign Ministry said the move was retaliation for Canada's 2024 decision to label Iran's Revolutionary Guards a terrorist group. Tehran called Ottawa's designation a violation of international law. Canada has listed the Revolutionary Guards, the ideological backbone of Iran's military, citing security concerns and alleged involvement in regional and global threats. The latest decision underscores the deepening diplomatic rifts between the two countries, with both sides trading sharp accusations and symbolic countermeasures. Now, moving ahead, Turkish police have detained 357 suspects in a nationwide operation against Islamic State. A day after 3 police officers and 6 militants were killed in a gunfight in northwest Turkey. Turkish Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya says that authorities carried out raids in 21 provinces across the country after police clashed with the militants in an 8-hour siege at a house in the town of Yalova on the Sea of Marmara coast south of Istanbul. A week after more than 100 suspected IS members were detained in connection with alleged plans to carry out Christmas and New Year attacks. According to reports, 8 police officers and another security force member were wounded in the raid on that property, which was one of more than 100 addresses targeted. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.